So on and off, really over, well, since we've really started doing sort of this type of stuff on this channel, we've been talking about the housing crisis on and off, and it's crazy to think how long that term has actually been in use in our political sort of lexicon language. It gets used all the time. Like we have been in a housing crisis since like 2012. Um, And there are numerous reasons for it. First of all, primarily is, of course, the cost of housing has increased exponentially. And you can look at places like Rightmove. You can look and you can see the buying history of these of any house just goes up and up and up and up. And sometimes if it's old enough, you can see what happened, of course, in like, the 2008 crash. You see many houses just drop in value, or they get stuck to a point and then they just get that point, and then the owner has to sort of sell it for less. And then the next person comes along and starts it again until someone gets to a point of, well, I now have to sort of sell it for less. So that's been one issue. But also that leads into the other issue of, and I think when we sort of talk about this as an issue, this is really a generational issue that can take a long time to actually get through to people. And that is seeing housing not as a sort of a commodity and as a value, but as something that, we need to generally live, and not seeing it as like an investment. That's certainly the view that we need to sort of get away from, because if we can get away from that, then there's no reason to, well, this house was bought for what originally for sort of, first sold for, you know 10 grand, back in the day. Now it costs, 4 to 5, maybe more times more than that. um it's the unfortunate, situation that we are in, and there's a lot of people out there that even myself, that said this is an issue that needs to be solved. But I do not underestimate how difficult a proposition would actually be to do. I mean, I don't even know how you would go about, in the first instance, even trying to convince people to stop looking at housing as like a form of investment, and that that housing is more a social good that, people need to, to essentially live. People need somewhere to live. It's incredibly important. um and it's strange to think you just to say that, but that often doesn't really get brought into the conversation about, you know if a person has a stain a stable, living condition, that can have a massive benefit on that person that is part of that. And this also comes back into the the way that sort of houses have been built for certainly quite a long time. We've got massive problems, of course, land banking of, house builders going in, buying up a vast area of land. I can think of a couple of places around me where this has happened, um, and then just not build on it for years, and then all of a sudden, boom, houses out of nowhere, because that area and houses in that area have gone up in price. So they've sort of decided, well, now's the time to build, because they want to get in on people sort of wanting to live in that area. Hence, that is, again, that's another problem. And we've talked about that, and the solutions around that are pretty obvious. You basically go, look, if you want to build a house, or these houses, these housing developers, well, you start building. You know, you put a time limit on. If you go, we're going to build X amount of houses on this plot explicitly for housing. Well, if you don't build within sort of, a year, then you are forced into selling that land. And I think that is a suitable way to sort of stop that practice. It's kind of, again, it's kind of weird, because I've said before, I've started reading Conservative Home, um, just to, really start to get an insight into sort of what shall we say, conservatives sort of seem to sort of think. And there was an article not too long ago basically saying, okay, guys, housing is a really big issue. We're not really fulfilling the need for housing, and it is to our detriment. And we've said this before, that this idea of, building houses, young people might vote for us. What is this? What is this nonsense? And they were talking about how land banking, apparently in like the conservative community, is seen as this conspiracy theory. No, land banking doesn't happen. And even in the article, they're going, okay, well, there's this example of land banking, this example of land banking. And then you'd go down to the comments, and there were people saying that, yeah, land banking doesn't exist. It's not a thing. So, yeah, it goes honestly crazy when you seem to think about that. And like I say, I think everyone, certainly in the UK, can think of places, of areas where they have seen land banking happen firsthand. Um, I certainly know too, in my area where I've seen it happen. And of course, the next thing is renting. One big thing that has been a very, very big problem has been people doing buy to let. So there has been a massive increase in landlords over the past couple of years. Thousands of new builds have been, rather than gone to people who want to get on the housing ladder, the house builders have built, rather than sort of, these first time, value properties for people to get on the housing ladder with, or anything like that. They get snapped up very quickly by landlords. You get, again, these new builds, these new houses that are not built for these, even though, again, the house building companies claim they are. Oh my god, this would be, perfect for someone buying their first house. Yet they're talking, what, 150, maybe 200 more. Sometimes I've seen advertised as, this would be perfect for someone buying their first house. And you're like, what? But yeah, that's the state that it's in. So that would be something that needs to be addressed, and you could do that very easily by going any new build for, I'd say, maybe 15 or 20 years. And I would say this should also definitely apply retroactively. Any new build for like 15 to 20 years cannot be buy to let, cannot be used at all. Like, you just cannot do it. So that would solve a lot of things. There's also a big issue at the moment where a lot of sort of people in the housing world are talking about that this buy to let bubble that has been inflating for quite a long time has now finally popped, or some people are expecting it to pop either very soon, or if not next year, predominantly because, again, of the cost of living crisis. You've got the energy crisis, and of course, landlords are going to, suffer for it. But the thing is, that means hundreds of thousands of properties are then going to come back on the market, which will be a very good thing, because very often it is, the landlords, obviously, when we talk about housing, you do need to think about tackling landlords and how you tackle them. There's also, I think, if you've rented a house for a certain amount of time, and again, this is where I said, you really need to tackle landlords. You need to sort of, rather than sort of short-term contracts, you need to say, right, if you are going to offer need to offer like long-term contracts, because that's really what people want. Very often you see it's 6 or 12 months, and that's it. That's it in terms of sort of a contract. But you look at sort of the average renting for someone in the UK tends to be around a year, where in Europe, it's, I think, ranges between 5 and 10. But that's because, again, countries in Europe tend to sort of put more focus on people having that stable living condition. And they understand that if you want to do that, you need to tackle landlords. But then there's you could, again, we could do an entire video just on the problems of, trying to tackle landlords. So that's just a few of the things that we are certainly facing. And like I say, I really do hope that from what I've been seeing, that this buy-to-let boom certainly comes to an end. It has been, I would say, one of the big things that has been certainly fueling the housing crisis. And we've talked about this before, that we can't just build our way out of this crisis. There are other things that we can do which will help alleviate this crisis, but obviously the Tories aren't interested in doing it. But as we've said before, certainly when we're looking at the potentially of a very big Labour majority potential at the next general election, Labour need to deliver. And I certainly think solving the housing crisis should be one of the things that is very high up on their agenda. Absolutely, very much so. So, as always, guys, like I say, thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.